In general, what were his hobbies and interests besides acting, poetry, and Shakespeare? You mentioned he used to shoot his own movies. He was known as a gourmet chef and had pets like his Paguana Tosca. What did he like to read? Did he have a favorite TV show or movies you know of?
The only times I ever saw him reading was when I would walk in the den and he was lying on the sofa reading a script. I never saw him reading paperbacks, magazines, newspapers, or hardback books. I do know that Victor Charles had read numerous books during his early life, though. It was in the late 1950s at the Mission Bay House in San Diego when Victor Charles was shooting amateur films. My father, mother, two sisters, and I would be visiting at the Buono house, and Victor Charles would be setting up his movie screen against the wall and then turning on his movie projector. His cast was made up from his O Globe Theater actor buddies. Now, one of his very best acting friends around 1961-62, it was Jonathan McMurtry. He, too, was one of Victor Charles's chauffeurs when he didn't have a card license. It was McMurtry who also drove him everywhere in those early days of his acting career in Hollywood. I had lunch one day with Jonathan McMurtry in Hillcrest in the early 1990s to hopefully hear some memorable gems of their early relationship in 1962. We mostly talked about acting and theater because I was an actor then, and I wanted his advice for what steps I should take in the future. As for Victor Charles being a gourmet chef, if that's true, he had to have learned it later on in his life. The only person cooking meals in the Encino house in 1965 was definitely my grandma Mert. I have a newspaper clipping showing Victor Charles and his mother in the Encino house standing near a gorgeous buffet on their kitchen table. It probably was for publicity reasons for his fans. I could be wrong, but I never saw any food like that before while living in Encino. One thing we can agree on, my Uncle Victor Charles did like to eat, even though I never saw him cooking or washing dinner plates. Pets, you say? Oh yes, we did have a German Shepherd dog named Sergeant at the Encino house in 1965. I love that dog. He was my buddy, and I would wrestle him on the floor in the den and on the outside lawn, pretending he was a lion and I was a Christian in a Roman arena. He always looked huge to me, but he was incredibly gentle. You could put your hand in his mouth and he would never bite you with his sharp teeth. Sergeant was Victor Charles's dog, and while I was there, he was my dog too. My grandma Mert had a small Chihuahua that I can't recall its name, and that is probably because I really didn't like that feisty little dog. It always sat near my grandmother's feet, and if I got too close, it would growl and threaten to bite me. In those days in Encino, I don't believe we ever had a television at all. Not in the den, living room, or anywhere else. Maybe Victor Charles had one, hiding one in his bedroom next to my grandma Mert's bedroom. But I never watched a television program or movie while living there. That does seem odd that a professional actor like Victor Charles wouldn't even have a single television set. During that time period, there was so much to do, though. My uncle, David Francis, and I worked at Domingo Italian Deli on Ventura Boulevard in Encino, California. Celebrities would often come in there to purchase their delicious food. I remember being behind the counter, and when looking up to greet the customer, it was actor Dick Van Dyke. As for hobbies, I'll always remember sitting with my Uncle Victor Charles, watching him gently and meticulously painting Easter eggs. At my young age, I was amazed by how this mountain of a man could be so gentle when holding a fragile egg while painting his masterpiece, Easter egg.
I've also read that his weight loss was one of the reasons he didn't get movie roles in big productions anymore, because they wanted his old look. Do you think that this is true, and did the family ever give him a hard time about his weight?
Victor Charles was tall and heavy from the very beginning when he was in elementary school. We all know how young children can be quite mean against those who are fat. He most likely got his share of seething insults throughout his first 15 years of living as a tall and fat young boy. Victor Charles was definitely not the ideal leading man when first acting on a stage or in his personal life. There were always plenty of handsome and physically fit young men to take girls out on dates. And there are many girls who wouldn't ever want to be seen going on a date with a very big and fat boy. I can only imagine the anguish he had to endure. The things most young men didn't have, like Victor Charles did, was his incredible intelligence and his exquisite talents to make people laugh. Victor Charles was smart enough to know he wasn't going to be the romantic lead in a motion picture or on the theater stage. He did have a few cheesy films under his buckle playing the lead, but for the big money productions and classic productions, he would always be overlooked every single time. Going back to 1959, Victor Charles had established himself as a prominent actor at the Eau Globe Theatre. He was respected and looked at in awe by his wonderful heavy stature and height that he carried ever so gallantly well. With television and motion pictures leading into the 1960s and 1970s, with the sex revolution abounding throughout the world, there weren't many leading roles for a tall and fat man actor. Leading men had to be handsome, and leading women had to be beautiful if they expected to work as stars. Victor Charles did what he could do, and he never dreamt his figure would have a 32-inch waistline, too. You asked me, did any family members give Victor Charles a hard time over his weight? I suppose at certain times in his life there might have been an ugly word or here or there. I couldn't name any particular family member who did, but we know how things go in families at various times. I do know this: when Victor Charles was living at the Mission Bay house near South Mission Beach, my grandma Mert put a lock on their refrigerator once to keep Victor Charles from eating them out of the house. It's commonly said, fat people eat for comfort. Well, if that is true, my Uncle Victor Charles would disagree, because he dreaded eating in restaurants where people could look at him and think, "Oh my, look at that horrible fat man. He should go on a diet."